benefits to provide, even if it's not greenhouse gas reductions. So while decarbonization is an imperative that we need to act on and we need to increase our effort on, there are still benefits to get from traditional energy efficiency. And I think threading that needle of expanding our work in an effective way while not losing out on the benefits from traditional efforts is one of the biggest challenges I see. I mentioned prohibitions on load building, prohibitions on fuel switching are barriers, but we adopted those policies for good reasons, that there was a fear that it would be a misuse of ratepayer money to allow utilities to go increase sales of a product. There may be reasons we want them to do that, as we talked today. They can provide a lot of benefits from doing that. But those activities still need to be providing benefits to the people who pay for them and in general. As I mentioned, those are two policy barriers I know of. Generally, I'm afraid I can't comment on the specifics here in Vermont.
Great. I think in terms of policy changes that would be needed to focus more on greenhouse gas reduction, I think there are a few. One, as I mentioned, we have policy mechanisms right now that put the utility Tier 3 programs and Efficiency Vermont's programs a bit at cross purposes, and yet both of us are going out to customers talking about changes they should make, and whether those changes are increase efficiency or electrify certain end uses. That has the potential to be very confusing. So I think breaking down the silos and then aligning us, working toward the same metric would be a big step forward. In terms of the other piece that I think is important, I didn't focus on a lot in my comments. I think there needs to be a specific focus on low and moderate income Vermonters and other underserved, hard to reach groups like small businesses and seniors as part of this transition. That's something that is carved out as part of the Efficiency Vermont portfolio right now. We have a certain focus on low income and making sure that funding goes to that group and that they are part of the programs and can access those resources. And I think that that should be increased in the future, and that we really should make sure that those individuals who really need the most support to transition to cleaner energy technologies, that they get what they need. And it's not going to be the same one size fits all program that works for someone who makes a decent wage in Chittenden County as someone who's really struggling to make ends meet in the southern part of the state, for example. So I think that we need a specific focus on that challenge, specific attention to how much of the resource goes to that underserved group. And I also think that we need to break down some of the silos between our different energy programs and align the folks who are working out in the field with customers so that we're delivering the best, most cohesive and understandable message about what folks should do to change.
Thank you. So a question came in on the REV app, and it relates to EVT. So Efficiency Vermont has been justifiably recognized and celebrated for its nation-leading status, all its innovation, decades of work. So anytime we talk about changing it, it makes some people nervous. The status quo has a certain power, even though there's a lot of evolving and surfacing challenges. So how do you address the concern of people who say, I like that you're talking about taking on greenhouse gas emissions, targeting them, but we don't want to lose what we've had and enjoyed and valued in energy, electrical efficiency?
Great question. So, to me, part of the, there are a few ingredients that have contributed to the success Efficiency Vermont has enjoyed over the years. One of those is a strong commitment, as June mentioned earlier, to data-driven decisions. And so, if we were to shift our focus from one metric to another, I don't see that going anywhere. I think we often actually get critiqued that it takes us a while to come to a decision about what's the right solution for a customer, what's the right program design, but that's really actually a valuable process that we go through in terms of deciding what's a proposal that will maximize benefits out to the state and reach the right customer group with the right offer at the right time and the right way. So that, I think, has been one of the facets of the successful programs that we've been able to roll out over the years. I don't see that changing at all. The other thing I don't see changing is a focus on energy cost reduction. So, this gets a little bit to the low and moderate income customer frame, but we have to focus on greenhouse gas reduction as a kind of climate imperative. And we know that in a state like Vermont that's economically challenged, we know that there's not a lot of extra money just sitting around waiting to be used on climate resources. So what I would like to see us do, which is what we have done for years, is really find those opportunities that can decrease the cost of energy to homeowners, to renters, to businesses, and then kind of, instead of focusing on the intersection between energy cost reduction and electricity use reduction, let's focus on the intersection between energy cost reduction and greenhouse gas reduction. There's a lot of overlap in those two Venn diagrams. And so I think that that's another thread that would continue in the future, that would make the programs that we offer and the types of incentives and the types of support and marketing and education, it would make it feel very similar to today, but in the background we would be oriented to just deliver a different set of benefits to the state.
I'll just echo that. I think it's sometimes we forget how much the work of energy efficiency is a matter of prioritizing actions. There's a host of energy efficiency, of things we can do to invest in energy efficiency, and an enormous amount of work that is done to analyze those decisions and pick out the ones that will provide the highest net benefit. And I think that analysis today is constrained by not having a ability to give full recognition to what benefits might be available in greenhouse gas reductions. But by adding that as an analysis, it's a matter of allowing those priorities to be set in a way that best reflect what we as a society are wanting.
Right. I have a quick question to the audience. Is anyone who's with an auto dealer, could you put your hand up? All right, so I don't see any hands. Could be, I haven't looked at I don't know every program going on at the moment. Could be there's one just for auto dealers next door, and so it's not a representative sample. All right, there we go. So TCI. But the question, and back to the panel, is transportation-based greenhouse gas emissions are about 50% of our portfolio. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, I think when people think of energy efficiency utilities, it's most often thermal loads that we talk about, or equipment installed in a location. So can you talk about the wild world of transportation and how you're becoming a regular part of that?
Sure. So I'll start by saying we're not a part of it right now, but that as we've had discussions with the utilities about their Tier 3 programs, we've also been following their work not just on heat pumps but also on electric vehicles, and looking at the customer incentives and how those are working. And so we're becoming more aware of and conversant in some of the transportation issues. And some of those that are covered by the electric vehicle programs that the utilities currently offer, and some that are not. So one of the things that I've talked a bit with some transportation experts about is just the segment of transportation demand management that is not involved in the electric vehicle transition. So there's a host of different ways to reduce greenhouse gases from transportation, including switching to electric vehicles, yes, but also decreasing vehicle miles traveled, increasing rideshare, transit, bike, ped, work, downtown redevelopment, so that people don't have to drive from their homes to their places of work, broadband, again, to echo June, so that people can telecommute without driving long distances. So there's a lot of work to be done in the transportation sector. And I think certainly the transition to electric vehicles is a big part of that, particularly in a rural state like ours. But one of the things that's exciting to me about getting an entity like Efficiency Vermont involved in the transportation work would be that, maybe we could look more broadly than just the electric vehicle option. Support the electric vehicle market, as I talked about, and work with utilities to help facilitate their really effective programs taking hold with customers, but possibly focus on other areas of transportation that are not as directly linked to the electric sector.
Absolutely. It's exciting to hear about the collaboration work that Efficiency Vermont's already engaged in, because I think that is the heart of the challenge that we face in thinking about electrifying the transportation sector. It's not an area that most utilities or even most utility regulators have a lot of exposure with, and it's a drastically different area. Consumers usually use electricity at their house or their business and in quite predictable ways. But how consumers use transportation, how they get from A to B, what their constraints are on the time in which they can do that, the speed with which they can do that, the urgency of needing to get there, are all different aspects of consumer use that we need to be aware of. We're seeing some work across the country trying to build on that collaboration and foster that. I'm happy to be working. One of my colleagues is working on a paper he calls First Steps for States on launching into this. And I think one of the most important is recognizing that we have departments with a huge amount of exposure with this, transportation departments, and they also have very little background or understanding of the electricity system. The notion that there are spots across the state that could be harder to connect to, that could be harder to provide electricity to, that there might be congestion on the grid and difficulties in getting electricity maybe to that current depot where buses are parked overnight. There's a lot of learning to be done there, but it starts with collaboration.
When we talk about this changing landscape, when we're talking about regulated utilities, the process is somewhat straightforward in that if we change the statutes that drive the PUC process, then it changes the outcomes and how the utilities operate. But then there's a whole domain of unregulated fuels. And so can you, of course, and they need to be part of this solution. I don't think of it as sort of a zero-sum game in any way. How do we make that transition and include the unregulated fuels in a way that works out for all the stakeholders?
Sure. I completely agree. I think, like I said, all fuels efficiency is how we need to be approaching our efforts. And the only way we can get there that I can see is by having all fuels financing. I think there are a host of different paths that we could take towards that, but it is definitely a challenge that we face. But it's a very important one, both for economics and for basic fairness. I wish I had better news. It's, I think, a challenge that we don't yet have that success story of, oh, that's how you do it. It's something that we're all struggling with here in this room and across the country. Unless you're not, in which case, please go to one of the Q&A microphones. Thank you.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, yes, Efficiency Vermont has done a little bit of research recently to try and uncover how other states are addressing unregulated fuels and what funding sources they're using and how they're delivering programs. And I think what we've learned is, as Joni said, there is no silver bullet. Many places, as Vermont, are using either regional cap and trade mechanisms or other funding sources outside of electric funding or taxes on the fuels themselves to deliver programs. And the magnitude of that funding varies based on the magnitude of those the sources. So in California, the Western Climate Initiative, in New England, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or the Forward Capacity Market. Those are our really two strong sources here in the state, and those are being used in places like Maine, which has a very large percentage of its heating through fuel oil. So I think there's a desire to kind of come together and find an answer to this question. Vermont may have an opportunity to start to explore and innovate in that arena. I was also, I'll just note, very interested to hear recently an announcement by the Northeast Fuel Dealers Association that they're moving toward 100% renewable fuel oil by 2050. So I think there's some movement there as well. I think the fuel dealers are hearing the strong desire from their customers to be more renewable, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I want to find out more about that announcement, so I'll be talking to Matt Cota about that very soon. But I think there's a need for some innovative solutions for that area, and I think we have a start here in Vermont based on what we've done to date, but there's more to be done for sure.
And actually, I think you mentioned briefly one aspect earlier, the competing panel we have on the Transportation Climate Initiative, I think reflects some of that expansion. There's conversations on trying to expand what REG covers to include emission sources that rise from transportation. I have not been very involved with that, but it's exciting to see that move forward and to see that we can hope provide some amount of funds that could be reinvested in our communities to provide benefits, reflecting, if not all fuels, at least a more fuels efficiency prioritize.
Great, well, thank you. So we are at time, but before we adjourn, I wanted to see if people still have our phrase in mind from when we started in the beginning. I'm going to say that I'm going to go through the phrase again. I hope that the two sentences. Hopefully, I'm joined by more than 3 people in the room. So we'll give it a go here, see if you remember it. So one is, we have an environmental emergency. And number 2 is, using my training, I will take appropriate and necessary action. So today we got a little more training on opportunities in front of us around beneficial electrification. I hope that you'll keep this in mind as you make whatever your area of effort is in the world of energy work and climate. Keep this in mind, and I know that all the partners in the room are interested in finding positive collaborations to help move forward at a faster pace, more broadly, more deeply than what we've been able to do in the last decade. So thanks again, and please thank our panel, Rebecca Foster and Joni Sliger.